It has been 24 years since Hugh Jackman first started playing Wolverine, and surprisingly enough, it has been 15 years since Ryan Reynolds played Deadpool in X-Men Origins Wolverine, which was technically the first crossover between these two characters, although that film didn't really stand the test of time. My first experience with the X-Men franchise was seeing X-Men 3: The Last Stand in theaters. Yes, I saw that one before the previous two, and even though they did build on each other story-wise, it wasn't like it is today where you really had to see every single film to understand the individual stories. You could pick up on a lot of context clues, and they did a pretty good job being individual plots. Not the case with the film like this. Deadpool and Wolverine really only works if you are completely caught up with almost the entire franchise. Obviously, there are some films you can skip, and as I have rewatched every single X-Men film within this past month, I felt like I was up to date on every single cameo and reference within this film. And don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything within this film because I do think it is one that is enjoyable if you go into it as blind as possible, which unfortunately wasn't the case for me as I saw some spoilers floating around on the internet, so just be cautious of where you're looking, but don't worry, this video is safe. But really what this film is more than anything else is a love letter to 20th Century Fox, which is a bizarre thing for a film to attempt to do, but as you may or may not know, Disney acquired 20th Century Fox several years back, and so one of the biggest questions was what was going to happen with the X-Men, because that was one Marvel property that wasn't allowed to be within the MCU, and so that's a big question going into this film is this the moment that they're finally going to overlap and cross over? And of course, I'm not going to answer that question, but I will say the film does give a little more insight on how it's going to look. But along with that question, I think the other one that I had, along with many other people, was, is this a good time to bring back Hugh Jackman as Wolverine? Because in my opinion, he had the perfect send-off in Logan, one of the best superhero films of all time, period. And so bringing him back really felt like Marvel was trying to gain trust with its fan base again. We all know that the past few years haven't been the strongest for the MCU, and even within the X-Men franchise, it has been years since they had a film that generally got positive reviews. And so I was nervous going into this film because it really felt like they were just trying to win me back over. And when the credits rolled on this film, I think they won me over just a little bit. But let me be clear, I have many issues with this film. It is far from a great story, and they really run into a lot of the same problems Marvel continues to have with stories like this. This is a story that relies heavily on the multiverse, which allows them to use a lot of shortcuts to get from A to B. In fact, the plot here is so simple, it almost feels stupid to even say out loud. But the point of this movie isn't the plot. The point of this movie is to get as many cameos and references in your face as possible, giving people who love these characters a chance to applaud in the theater. It really runs into similar issues like Endgame has or No Way Home, where it's hard to review or even rate these types of movies, because as an isolated film, it honestly just doesn't work. But as a celebration to a franchise and to characters, and like I said, an entire studio that really carried Marvel for an entire decade, that's what this movie is for. It's for people like me who spent way too much time on the internet in the mid to late 2000s trying to find X-Men rumors and see who was going to be cast in the next project. So if that is you, you are at least going to smile and get some enjoyment in catching some of those references that honestly not a lot of people in my theater understood. But if that isn't you and you're more of just a casual X-Men or Marvel fan, I totally understand how this movie will not work. The other parts that didn't work for me are just the general Deadpool vibe that I've really never been on the same page of. The overused joke in this film is how it's the first Disney rated R Marvel movie, and he somehow finds a way to tell it over and over and over again. But some people seem to be still into it because my audience was having a great time every time he tried to push those boundaries. I would say for me, there were probably 4 or 5 times I laughed out loud. And as far as the other jokes, maybe about 50% of the time I smirked or chuckled to myself a little bit, and the other 50% just did not land at all. And I know that this is the conclusion to the Deadpool trilogy, but for some reason I thought maybe it wouldn't be so much about him, but it kind of is. And so the moments that work best for me is when he's kind of removed from the picture and we're looking at the overall universe of what's happening, when we're seeing cameo after cameo, these big stupid fight scenes. And the parts that don't work are the more sentimental moments when they're actually trying to make a point or tell a message. The other part that really did not work at all for me was most of the exposition, which honestly is probably half of the dialogue in this film. There are so many moments where characters just need to stop, stand completely still, and explain to each other and both you, the audience, by breaking the fourth wall, what is happening, which feels like the case of a lot of recent Marvel films, but this one especially needs a lot of detail given for you to even understand what's happening. And even then, I can't even say I fully grasped everything they were saying. It's a lot of exposition. And then there's the whole multiverse stuff, which honestly feels a little dated and seems like it might have worked better 2 or 3 years ago. Now that we've seen Spider-Man do it, we saw The Flash do it, we saw a multiverse film win Best Picture, it just feels like it's getting a little old. So there's a chance that I would enjoy this film much better a couple years ago, but because we know it's coming and because we have an idea of what the implications could be within the story, it just doesn't feel as novel or as exciting as it could be. This is also the first Marvel film directed by Shawn Levy, who seems to be Ryan Reynolds' just right-hand man at this point, after directing Free Guy and The Atom Project. He previously did a lot of films for 20th Century Fox, so it kind of makes sense, since he has a relationship with the people who made these franchises, that he would be the one to write this love letter to the studio. But his aesthetic, I do think, is also hit or miss for me. The creative decisions that this movie tries to do when it comes to the needle drops or the very overused slow-mo, it's all attempting to try to create these fan service moments, which I don't blame them, and many superhero films have done. I think back to the first Avengers film, where there's that perfect camera pan where it shows the entire Avengers all posing in the exact perfect spot. At the time, it felt really cool, but after seeing it done in 10 different movies, it does get a little bit old. And this movie has a ton of that. Countless moments where Deadpool and Wolverine are just slow-mo in the same frame, about to fight, maybe just finishing a fight, and they pause in the perfect moment that's gonna make a great screenshot for Twitter. So there were times where it worked and I felt like I wanted to stand up and applaud, but there were other times where I rolled my eyes. So honestly, I think in this case, less might have been more for them. So overall, I did really enjoy my time with this film. It was more positive than negative, but I do think it's just due to my bias, how I grew up on this franchise. It is absolutely not gonna work for everyone, and there are very few people I would even recommend this film to. But if you do fit the description of someone who spent years and years watching Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, you're at very least gonna enjoy seeing him pick up the claws again. So those are my thoughts on Deadpool and Wolverine, but I would love to hear yours if you have seen the film. So if you've seen it, please comment below, and I will see you next time.